Hi, good morning. Welcome to Kollel Ahavat Israel. Thank you everybody for joining us. Today we have a special class about Parashat Ki-Tisa and really the subject of why the people of Israel are still suffering until today. So before we start, as usual, we're going to have Be'ezat Hashem, a refuah shlema, a blessing for people that needs health. As we know, the whole world today with the corona need health. But Be'ezat Hashem, our goal is to bring a little light and Torah into the world with Kollel Ahavat Israel in our classes. So Be'ezat Hashem, today, first and foremost, this class is dedicated Le'ilui Nishmat Chaya Miriam Bat Sarah, Ve'le'ilui Nishmat Tova Bat Sarah, Ve'Rachel Bat Ruchama, Ve'Nisim Ben Pirchia. And the refuah shlema Be'ezat Hashem to Bernie Baruch ben Chaya Miriam, Ephraim ben Devorah, Flori bat Rachel, Chaim ben Raymond, Yaakov ben Genia, Shulamit bat Tzipora, Karen bat Aliza, Be'ezat Hashem for our guest patient from Israel, Mr. Eliezer ben Leah. May Hashem give him a new heart this week, B'zchut Chag HaPurim and B'zchut the merit of his fathers and the merit of Avraham, Yitzchak and Yaakov. Okay, so Be'ezat Hashem, today, by the way, is also what we call Ta'anit Esther, is the fast of Esther. And as we know, Esther, as mentioned in the Megillah that we're going to read tonight, brought the redemption for the people of Israel in Iran, so to speak, in Shushan, in Paras and Madai. So today the parasha says, Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe le'emor, ve'asita, Ki Tisa et Rosh Bnei Israel lifkudehem. He says, just so you know, this parasha, by the way, this portion of this parasha, comes actually as a cure for what about to happen with the golden calf sin. This parasha is one of the most chaz v'chalila bad parashot in the sense of the people of Israel, even though we'll see later on that the people that sinned with the golden calf were mostly the Erev Rav, the Egyptian convert that joined the people of Israel, also known the Asafsuf. And Hashem says to Moshe, I want you to count the people of Israel. The word Ki-Tisa, by the way, has a very beautiful explanation. The word Tisa is to elevate, and the word ki is kol yom, is an acronym for every day you should elevate the people of Israel. How do we elevate the people of Israel? As we know, we give tzedakah. Right now the people of Israel gathered all the material to build the Mishkan, build the tabernacle, so to speak, in the desert. Just so you know, the tabernacle in the desert, the Mishkan, stood for 480 years from this moment. On the 1st of Nisan will be inaugurated. It will be the year 2449 to the count of the Jewish people, and it will be all the way to King Solomon until the first temple was built. The Mishkan, the tabernacle, was in Shiloh, which is in Jerusalem. And of course, this Mishkan, the word Mishkan means mashkon, means collateral. You know, Hashem says, build me a Mishkan that I'll reside within you. You know, build me a temple, so to speak. Not just a physical temple. You know, of course, Hashem is everywhere. Hashem is in the entire universe, is really inside Hashem. Hashem is bechol makom, nimtza maleh kol haaretz kevodo. The whole world is both our world and the worlds outside and the galaxies and the universe. Everything is Hashem, and Hashem created everything. He says, but within the people of Israel, I want them to build me a temple, so to speak, a mikdash, a mishkan that I can reside within them. Of course, the obligation is for Hashem to reside in us, we have to be clean personally. We can also, Hashem can reside within us, our body, so to speak. And Hashem says, give to the Rosh Bnei Israel, count the heads of Israel, meaning each person, right, the head, so to speak, a Rosh, each person should give what we call kofer nafsho. They have to give a little tzedakah that will save their soul, so to speak, the nefesh. As we know, Hashem says that each person that is 20 years old, right, has to give half a shekel. You know, the question is asked, why do we have to give only half a shekel and not a full shekel? By the way, today the half a shekel is worth about $5-6 in American dollars and about 26 shekels in Israel. This half is also to teach us many things about us. We as people, as the Gemara will tell us, that we are half. You know, when Hashem created Adam and Eve and then He split them, we each other become a half. And only after we marry, we become a whole. The Gemara will teach us that a person that's not married is not a full person, is half of a person. And we, half as people, cannot be full until we have Hashem. We complete each other. Hashem bring us the half of what we call the spiritual part, and we have the half of the physical part, our body. Hashem says, take half a shekel. You know, just so you know, Moshe Rabbeinu did not understand how to make this half a shekel. So the Gemara will teach us, and also in many books in the Torah and the Mefarshim, that Moshe Rabbeinu had 4 items that he could not understand how to make, so to speak. And it's called miksha. When Kadosh Baruch Hu says, I want you to build the menorah, you know, miksha achat, 1 unit, he could not figure it out. So how do we do that? So Hashem showed him, you know, in Mount Sinai, as a Kadosh Baruch Hu, of course, as we know, has all the technology that we use today, as far as, you know, iCloud and YouTube and all these movies and editing and, you know, schematics and designs, all been given already to Moshe Rabbeinu, and Hashem showed him how to make, you know, like I showed you in the clouds, Hashem says today. Today it's called it iCloud, it's the clouds of glory. And the 4 things that Moshe could not understand how to make is the acronym of Miksha, which is a menorah, the kuf, the korbanot, the sacrifice, shin, the shekel, and hey is hatarichon, the halevana, how to do the calendar. So we see that Moshe Rabbeinu now is obligated everybody to give half a shekel. Truma la'Adonai, you know, it's a truma, it's a donation. And it says here some amazing, you know, Hashem says to give this, you know, condition for the giving of this half shekel. He says, "Ashir lo yarbe ve'adal lo yameit mimachatzit hashekel." He says that no matter how rich you are or how poor you are, you have to give only half a shekel. This basically to allow the equality amongst all the people of Israel. They all have the equal share in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle. You know, no one can come and say, oh, I'm a rich guy and I'm giving that, or I'm a poor guy, I don't have to give. But everybody can and has and will and did give half a shekel. Half a shekel, you know, it's not a lot. And remember, the people of Israel left Egypt with wealth. Of course, Korach, as we know, was one of the richest people in the world at the time. He took third of the loot and the money that was brought to Egypt when Yosef was managing the world for 7 years of famine. The entire world came to Egypt, and the entire wealth of the world came with it. People sold first their materials, they gave gold, they gave money, silver, then they sold their real estate, then they sold, you know, themselves, then they sold their lands, and basically Yosef owned the entire world through this 7-year process. And Korach, as we know, was his finance minister, so to speak. He took, when they left Egypt, he took third of the wealth of the entire world with him. By the way, Yosef hid he took the entire wealth and he divided to 3 parts, and he hid 3 different locations. As we know, Korach found one of them. Later on, the Caesar Antigonus, which was the friends of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, which his parents saved Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and they became very close friends. Because he was so good to the Jewish people, at the end he converted Hashem, merited him to find the other third of the wealth of the world. And as we know today, the 2/3 still missing, Korach and the other third that Yosef hid. But back to ourselves, Hashem says, give machatzit hashekel. Machatzit, by the way, if you take the word machatzit, it's a very interesting word. There's the word chatzi and met. There is half and death. Meaning there are people that do not give tzedakah, don't give half of what Hashem asks to give, the half shekel. They will bring chaz v'chalila, death upon them. It says that what Hashem says, put the shekel against the nefesh. You know, the word shekel and nefesh has equal, numerical code, which is 430. A person, when you give tzedakah of the shekel, you will save your soul, the nefesh. As we know, our nefesh is the lowest part of our body, so to speak, the spiritual part. There is 5 component to our spiritual part. It's called Naran Chai. Naran is Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. There's 5 elements. Most of us possess only 3. The Nefesh, the Ruach, and the Neshama. And as we know, the Neshama lives every night and records everything that we do during the day. And the Ruach and the Nefesh remain in the body to maintain it in a state of almost clinical death, so to speak, to maintain the system that working. And that's why when the Neshama return and in the morning we get up, it says, thank you Hashem for waking up us from the dead. Baruch atah Adonai Mechaye Metim, as we say, and we says, Machzir Neshamot Livgarim Metim. Hashem returned the Neshama to almost a dead body, so to speak. So we know that in order to give the half a shekel, you save your life, you save your nefesh. As we said, nefesh and shekel, 430 in Gematria. And we know that the sacrifice to bring to Hashem is really, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them the opportunity to first and foremost have a mishkan where they can atone for themselves. The people of Israel, unfortunately, still suffering until today. And we'll get to it later. Why are we still suffering until today? Why there is so much chaos in the world today? Why the people of Israel went through so much, atrocities? It's merely for one reason, but there is 2 components to it, and we'll get to it in the future. So Hashem says, I'm going to give you what we call the refuah lamaka. The Gemara in Masechet Megillah will tell us that Hashem will never, chaz v'chalila, bring a punishment before He has a way to fix it for people to redeem themselves and to cure themselves. And it says here that Hashem brought this elevation of the people of Israel in order to atone for the golden calf sin that will come later. So he says, "Velakachta et kesef haKippurim." This is a money that would lechaper. Kippurim is come from the word to atone to the people of Israel. Lezicharon lifnei olam lechaper. So this will stay with them forever, to basically have the opportunity to atone for ourselves. And we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is counting the people of Israel. The question is, why does Hashem need to count the people of Israel? Hashem can count everything. Hashem knows how many leaves. Imagine this. How many leaves are in the world at any given moment? How many of every of His creation? How many mosquitoes? How many fish? How many stars? How many everything? Why do Hashem needs to count the people of Israel? So He says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, first and foremost, remember this portion comes after the golden calf sin. Hashem is like a shepherd. When chaz v'chalila, a shepherd, has a flock that's been attacked by, let's say, a pack of wolves, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is like the shepherd. He gathered, like the shepherd will gather all the remaining, flock, and He will count them, and He will bring them closer, and He will make sure that are protected. So to speak, that Hashem does the same thing. By the way, you're not allowed to count people with numbers. Of course, the Gemara will teach us that Ein Hara and the Satan has power over numbers. That's why you're not allowed to count your family or minyan. If you go to shul, you have to use certain brachot that has 10 words in it in order to count. For an example, when you do motzi lechem min haaretz, when you do the bracha of taking, blessing the bread, is 10 words. Eser is come from the word maaser, right? You're 10th. A person that doesn't do netilat yadayim, we have the bracha of washing our hands. Netilat yadayim, it saved the people of Israel from many, many, many atrocities around the world. The word netilat yadayim, if you recall the blessing, it says al netilat yadayim. Al netilat yadayim is the acronym of ani. If a person does not wash their hands, of course we are obligated to wash many times during the day, especially before we eat bread, and he become ani, and then he's not become eser, ma'aser. As we know, when a person eat bread, he has to say 10 words. Eser is come from the word ashir, which is a rich person. When you bless, when you wash your hands and you bless for everything that Hashem gave you, then you are blessed. So the counting of people has to be done by words of Torah. And of course we know David HaMelech accidentally count the people of Israel, not out of any chaz v'chalila a way to harm them, but unfortunately 70,000 people died. When David HaMelech, if you read in the book with Yoav, you'll see that the count of the people, 70,000 people died. And of course Hashem gave him 3 choices how to be punished, and David says, I'd rather be punished by you, Hashem, and not mankind. Ki rabim rachamecha, because Hashem, you are merciful. And of course, we know that David HaMelech was punished several times, but let's continue. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu now is allowing the people of Israel to have some sort of a payment, some sort of an obligatory donation that would save them in the future. So if we see in the next page in our book in the parasha, it says, "Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe le'emor, ve'asita kior nechoshet." They're about to build the tabernacle here, and the tabernacle had many holy parts to it. Of course, everything is holy. Questions asked, why does Hashem says, I want you to build me, a sink, so to speak, a laver where you can wash your hands for the Kohanim and the Levites? And Hashem specifically says, build me this sink out of copper. And our sages debated that many times. Why does Hashem really ask to build that first, and not let's say the Holy of Holies or the Ark or the cherubs or all the other elements, vessels, or everything that's going into this amazing Mishkan, this tabernacle? Hashem says, first I want you to start with this kior nechoshet. So our sages will teach us this kior called kior tzevaot. We know in the history of the people of Israel, women saved us all the time. It says, Al yedei nashim nigalu ve'al yedei nashim yigalu. Like the woman saved us in the past, so will save us in the future. So this, what we call the copper nechoshet, as we say, this sink will be built out of certain copper mirrors that the people of Israel, the women of Israel, had in Egypt. So when the people of Israel started the slavery in Egypt, as we know, the men pretty much gave up on everything. They did not believe in redemption, but the women did. The Jewish women were so enamored and strong believer that Hashem will take us out of Egypt. They built for themselves mirror coppers, they're made out of copper. Those mirrors, they will beautify themselves. And every day when their men come out, after working hard all day, 16, 18 hours to the house, the women will be ready to meet them and greet them in the front, beautifully looking, and of course try to elevate their men's neshama, so to speak, and their feeling. And they would show them, they will take these copper mirrors and they will hold them together. Says to the husband, look how beautiful we are with those mirrors. It was, by the way, this was the first selfie in the Torah, when you could see yourself reflection. And the woman says, look how beautiful we are and how Hashem made us, and let's have more children. Now, I don't know if you know, but when the people of Israel were enslaved, women gave birth to 6 Every birth was 6 children. As we know that to be true, it says in the Torah, Vaishratzu me'od me'od. Vaishratzu is really a word that has 6 letters. And me'od me'od is like also 6 in it, right? 3 and 3 is 6. And as we know, when Yaakov Avinu went down to Egypt, he went down with the 66 nefashot, plus we had Yosef, Osnat, and Ephraim and Menashe. Altogether, there were 70 Hebrews that went down to Egypt. When they came out of Egypt, there were 3.6 million of them. And that was only 20%, because as we know, in the darkness plague, as we says, 80% died. And the people of Israel came out of Egypt, again, from 70 after 210 years to 15 million. Out of them, 3.6 million came out. And the 600,000 that we mentioned in the Torah, they represent only the soldiers, so to speak, only the warriors. Tzvaot Hashem. So this mirrors, Hashem says, I want you to take that and make the sink. When the Kohanim comes to Bet HaMikdash, or they come to the Mishkan in the desert, or in Shiloh, I want them to wash their hands and feet in this sink and remind themselves that due to those holy women, the Jewish women, we are saved from Egypt. And as we know in the future, of course, it starts with Sarah Imenu, Rivka, Leah, and Rachel, and then later on with Miriam, and of course not to mention Yocheved, her mother, and not to mention Tzipporah, and not to mention Bathsheba, Aaron's wife, and not to mention all the women that came after, Yael and Devorah, and all the women that saved the people of Israel. And not to mention today in Purim, Esther HaMalka. And we see that Hashem says, I want you to have the understanding, when you come to this holy Mishkan, you need to utilize the power of the women that build this, so to speak, copper mirrors in order to beautify themselves and to allow the continuation of the people of Israel and come out to redemption. So this is really the epitome of the respect for women that Hashem put in the Mishkan of the Holy of Holies for the Kohanim to wash their hands and feet. By the way, I don't know if you know, but the Kohanim used to wash their hands from the elbow all the way to the fingers, and of course their feet as well. That's where the Tumah reside. That's why the Arabs and the Muslim, they take everything that it's done in the Jewish people and they copy it and trying to do that. But it's really not for them. They don't need to wash their hands, only for hygienic reason. Speaking of Netilat Yadayim, we have today a corona. The virus of corona in the world, as we know, is a big catastrophe, even though it killed a very, very little amount of people in comparison to flu or any other diseases. For an example, just last week, there are 20-some thousand people died from flu. And from corona, only 36. So you see, it's not really bad. Of course, we know that the corona is spread all over the world, and Hashem says, listen, I'm tired of this, the people of Israel fighting, and I'm tired of all the goyim coming to Israel. I don't know if you know, but in the past 10-15 years, there are more and more goyim coming to the land of Israel and defiling the land. The land of Israel is filled with the Erev Rav, it's filled with non-Jews. You have all this, people coming from Asia to the Kotel every day, and you have all the European coming, and God forbid what's happening in Israel between all the religion, and Hashem says enough is enough, and He brings what we call chaydak. Chaydak is a little things that is very skinny, you don't even see it by the naked eye. Chaydak is a virus in Hebrew. And of course we say corona in Gematria is ever minachai. When you eat non-kosher and chaz v'chalila, like Chinese, they eat all this, horrific, they don't even kill the animal, they eat them alive. It brings them chaz v'chalila such diseases. And we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says enough is enough. And the netilat yadayim, the wash of the hands, saved the people of Israel many times in the past. As we know, in 1337, there was the bubonic plague. The bubonic plague killed 200 million people around the world. Just in China alone, it was, by the way, the bubonic plague lasted 5 years, from 37 to 42. 1337 to 1342. 35 million Chinese people died. And of course in Europe and the rest of the world, 165 million. But Jewish people, very, very little, minuscule amount. Why? Because we wash our hands. And this is a mitzvah obligatory, that the Rabbanan put together. As we said, we have 613 mitzvot. And the Rabbanan, our sages, added 7 more. One of them is Netilat Yadayim. And just to mention the 613, if you take the word Tisa et Rosh Bnei Israel, is an acronym and gematria of 613, which is alluding to the mitzvah. When we elevate ourselves, we have to do all 613 mitzvot. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks that, it says, I want the Kohanim to come there, they wash their hands and their feet when they come to the Holy of Holies and to the Mishkan. Yirchatzu velo yamutu, because they wash, they will not die. Begishatam el hamizbeach, begishatam el hamizbeach lesharet elaktir laishe laAdonai. The Hashem speaks of this ketoret, this incense. That was as we said, it was such a beautiful aromatic smell of combination of materials and spices and oil. And usually, just so you know, the ketoret was made twice a year in Yerushalayim by the Kohanim, and they used to make a batch of 1,600 kilos in today's term every time. And they say when they used to make the ketoret, the whole city would smell so nice for 6 months. And if there was a wedding, the bride did not need to put any perfume on her, because it doesn't matter, nobody will smell her. The smell around the city of Jerusalem was so beautiful and superb that nothing can compare with that smell of the ketoret, of the incense. And Hashem is obligating now to create another kind of what we call ketoret. It's really mishcha. Mishcha is a cream, a special cream, to anoint the Kohanim and all the vessels of the what we call the Mishkan. You're not allowed to make this, by the way, anywhere outside of the Mishkan. It was only for the Mishkan. The Torah says whoever chaz v'chalila make something like that, the Torah says ish asher yirkach kamohu v'asher yiten mimenu al zer v'nichrat me'amav. This is one of the karet. There's 36 karet in the Torah. If a person make this kind of cream to use for personal use, chaz v'chalila, they'll be dead both in this world and the world to come. So we see that Hashem is giving the component of those this ketoret. It says Kach lecha samim nataf u'shechelet v'chelbona samim ulvona zaka bad bevad yeh v'asita ota ketoret rokach maaser rokach meulach taror kadosh. So the component of the ketoret, as we said, has 11 parts. Originally it was 10. By the way, the Gemara will teach us in the Zohar that Moshe Rabbeinu asked Hashem for something after the golden calf scene, that he would be able to deliver the people of Israel and they can use to atone with. And Hashem says, give 10 angels, give him one component. And then Satan, Malach HaMavet, the angel of death, complained and says, I am also an angel. The mere fact that you made me the angel of death is Hashem, is your choice, but I am an angel. I want to be part of this ketoret. I want to be part of these components of the ketoret. And Hashem says, yes, give, you're right. And they said, give, and he gave the chelbona. Chelbona, jalbona, is one of the stinkiest thing on earth. It's actually something that when Satan comes to take somebody's neshama away, chaz v'chalila, he put one drop of this chelbona in their body, and the whole body rot within 24 hours. It's the stinkiest, chelbona. If you look at the word chelbona, as we mentioned in the past, has the word chabala, as a sabotage. But of course, we need to have 10 and one that's not so good in order to make it perfect. That's why we say achad asar. We separate between the 1 and the 10th, and that's why we really, understand that when Hashem gave the ketoret, even with the combination of something bad, he still could smell good, allowing us the tshuva, so to speak. And then Hashem instructs Moshe, and he says, I want you to call upon, I, Hashem, will tell you who to call upon, is a kid named Betzalel ben Uri. Betzalel ben Uri was the grandson of Hur. And as we know, we'll see in the golden calf scene, Hur would die. Hur was the prophet that went to fight the Arab, and they killed him. And Hashem says to Moshe, I want you to take his grandson Betzalel, va'amale oto ruach Elohim. It was a 13-year-old kid that Hashem gave him the Ruach HaKodesh, the ability to understand Chokhmah and Tvuna and Da'at. He had all the components of knowledge to create and build and orchestrate the Mishkan. And he says, I'm going to give him another person to help him, another kid. His name is Aholiav ben Achisamach, Lemate Dan. Aholiav was the grandson of Nachshon ben Aminadav, and as we know, Nachshon was the first one to walk into the sea of reeds, B'Kriyat Yam Suf. He had such faith in Hashem, and when he reached the water with his nostril, he says, Giu Maim Ad Nafesh. You know, it's like also we know that it happened too with Abraham. And the two children, Betzalel and Aholiav, they will basically build the entire Mishkan. You know, if I came to you and I said to you, I want you to build this, I'll give you a description. We'll take 100 different builders. Each one will build something completely different, because each one has different knowledge, different understanding, different vision. But yet, when Betzalel and Aholiav were put in charge of this task of building the Mishkan, they knew exactly what Hashem wanted. We know later on, we'll see that even Moshe tried to test them and tried to trick them, and they stood and understood better than Moshe Rabbeinu, so to speak. Chaz v'chalila, not better, but they said, Moshe, you're mistaken, that's not what Hashem said, this is what Hashem said. And they really had the Ruach HaKodesh. That's how Moshe verified that they truly have the Ruach HaKodesh. So it says here, this is, by the way, the second time the Torah is talking about the obligation of Shabbat. And as we see that Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor, Ve'ata daber al bnei Israel lemor, ach et shabtotai tishmeru, ki ot hi beini uvenechem ledorotechem, ladat ki ani Adonai mikadeshechem. So we know that the Shabbat is a very, very, very holy thing. You know, Hashem stopped everything on Shabbat. And how we not to keep Shabbat. We see the word Shabbat is a very interesting word. You know, Shabbat has what we call the acronym of three things that Hashem says, Ot hi la'olam. Ot means an oath in English, right? The word oath is taken from Hebrew, from the word ot, is a covenant between us and Hashem. It says, Ki ot hi beini uvenechem. This is an oath between. So Shabbat is an acronym of three things that the Torah has the word oath related to them. Shin for Shabbat, Bet for Brit Milah, the circumcision, and Taf for Tefillin. You know, those are three elements that always will be our witnesses that we are Jewish. When we put Tefillin on, when we have the Brit Milah, and we keep Shabbat. And as we says, V'shamartem et ha-Shabbat, Ki kodeshi lachem mechalelei amot yumat. Imagine, chaz v'chalila, if I came and told you today that a murderer is actually less than somebody that desecrated the Shabbat. Imagine I can murder somebody, my punishment will be less than if I disgrace the Shabbat, if I transgress the Shabbat. The Torah says here clearly, Et ha-Shabbat, ki kodesh hi lachem, mechalelea mot yumat. A person that does not keep Shabbat is taken away from this world and the world to come. In other words, the Gemara will teach us that a person that does not keep Shabbat is considered a goy. Again, I'm going to say that slowly and clearly. The Torah and the Gemara says that a person that does not keep Shabbat is not part of the people of Israel. So if you have chaz v'chalila, people that drive on Shabbat to shul, or people that goes to game on shul, or to the beach, or desecrate Shabbat, they're not really considered Jewish. Very hard to accept, but it's the truth. They say, for an example, you're not allowed to lend money to a Jew within interest. If I lend money to an Orthodox Jew with interest, I have no share to the world to come. But the Gemara will teach us that if a person does not keep Shabbat and is Jewish, you are allowed to charge them interest. Very interesting. So he says here, cause why? This is Hashem says, Chaz v'chalila, a person that desecrates Shabbat, v'nichreta hanefesh ha'im mikerev amea. This person will never, ever, this neshama will be taken from the tree of life, from the tree of the what we call neshamot chatzuvot. You know, Hashem's throne, his throne, the Gemara says in Masechet Sanhedrin, if I'm not mistaken, that the neshamot of the Jewish people are coming from under the throne of Hashem. Machzevot neshamot mitachat kiseh hakavod. It says, Chaz v'chalil, if a person doesn't keep Shabbat, is cut off from both this world, the world to come, and from the resurrection of the Jewish people in the future. Chaz v'chalila. Kol melacha, kol ha'oseh melacha b'yom Shabbat mot yumat. Hashem repeat this 3 times here, which is very, very, very important to understand. Shabbat is the Holy of Holies. They say, more than you keep the Shabbat keeps you. It was said to Benjamin Netanyahu, when Benjamin Netanyahu did not protect the Shabbat and allowed the public transportation to drive back after 40 years, that's when his whole problem started, and there is no government until today. And I want you to know there will be no government. We are in days of Mashiach, and it says that in the days of Mashiach there will be no government in the land of Israel, and the Arabs will try to rule the land. And we see today the Arabs has what we call 15 mandates. They want to put together a government with 4 military head of militaries, 3 head of militaries, and a moron named Lapid. So you see that in reality that's exactly what's happening today. Hashem says, "V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et Shabbat la'asot et Shabbat ledorotam." By the way, if you take the Kiddush for the wine, Yom HaShishi vaychulu hashamayim va'aretz, if you count from the second Yud of Yom HaShishi, every 7 letters you'll see it will spell the word Israel. Again, when you do the Kiddush, if you take the second letter of the word Yud, Yom HaShishi, and you skip what we call the code of the Tanakh, the Bible code, skips of 7, it will spell the word Israel, meaning that the Shabbat is only for the people of Israel. Goyim, none of them are obligated to keep Shabbat, and they say if a Goy keeps Shabbat, Chaz v'chalila, needs to be put to death. It's amazing. So we see here that HaKadosh Baruch Hu emphasizes about the Shabbat while he's talking about the building of the Mishkan. Why? Because the Mishkan it was like almost an elevated, earthly, holy, and unbelievable dwelling, that on Shabbat there were things there that's happening that should never, ever happen to anywhere else except in the Mishkan. For example, there was what we call Ner HaTamid. There was light that was lit up the whole time, and it was lit up on Shabbat too. There were certain things that were done. That's why the obligation, it says, Velo tevaru esh b'mashvotechem. Don't light up fire or any other transgression of Shabbat in your homes, in your cities. But in the Mishkan is a different kind of realms. And by the way, there was 39 melachot. There's 39 transgression of Shabbat, and there was 39 melachot in the Mishkan as well. So we see here something amazing. We continue. It says, "Vayiten el Moshe kechaloto ledaber ito be'ar Sinai shenei luchot ha'edut luchot even ketuvim be'etzba Elohim." This whole, by the way, speaking of Moshe and Hashem, it was in Mount Sinai. As we know, Moshe Rabbeinu was talking to the people of Israel in Mount Sinai, and then on the 6th day of Sivan he was done, and on the 7th of Sivan he went up to the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. And we see here something amazing. It's Hashem gives him this luchot, this tablet, so to speak, and those luchot, just so you understand, it was that something that came from the heavens and not from earth. The first set of luchot Hashem gave him, those luchot you can read both front and back the same way. And there was 2 letters that cannot touch those luchot, or this, so to speak, the holy stones. and there was the letter Samech and Mem. Samech Mem is Satan, right? Samael. Samech Mem, and if you write the end of Samech, or we call Samech Sofit or Mem Sofit, you'll see that there is an inside circle, but it was hanging in mid-air. It was not touching anything. Hashem did not want the Samech Mem to be part of the Luchot. And the Torah says here, Vayar Am ki boshesh Moshe laredet. It says that the Am, by the way, every time the Torah mentioned the word Am or Amcha, it's not the people of Israel. It's speaking of the Erev Rav, the Egyptian, so to speak, convert that came out with the people of Israel. Some say there was 40,000 of them, and some say there were actually, for every Hebrew that came out, there were 5 Erev Rav. So imagine how many millions of them. But the Midrash says there were 40,000 that came with them, and they say, Vayar Am, this nation, that Moshe is late. Boshesh, the word Boshesh means late, but it's also Boshesh. He was late with 6 hours. They miscalculated, and they gathered. It said, Vayakhel Am al Aharon vayamru elav kum, aseh lanu Elohim asher ilchu lefanenu, ki ze Moshe האיש אשר העלנו מארץ מצרים לא ידענו מה היה לו. So here comes the Erev Rav and gather against Aharon and say, build us a god. First and foremost, just so you know, when they did that, the people of Israel did not participate, but they allowed it. That's why they were punished. As I mentioned before, there is all the sins and all the punishment that we receive in our world today come from 2 main sources of horrific sins that we endured and did. Is the sin of the golden calf and the sin of the cell of Yosef. We'll know in the Megillah that Esther will ask Mordechai, which one we're paying for right now, mizeh or mizeh? From this one or this one? And of course, as we know, it was because of the cell of the golden calf, because it was Chaz v'Chalila, we were not close to Hashem, we were pezurim, we were all over the world, and Hashem was asleep, so to speak. That's what Haman says, Elohem Yashen. So here, the Erev Rav with the 2 sons of Bilam. Bilam had 2 sons, magician named Unius and Umbrius. They were the magician that could make pretty much everything that of the first 3 plagues that Moshe and Aaron did. And there were 2 children, so to speak, but magician of the highest level. They gathered on Aaron and were about to kill him. Aaron, the Zohar says that he knew something amazing, and that's why he took it upon himself to build this golden calf, so to speak. Before they came to Aaron, there was, as I mentioned before, a guy named Hur. Hur was the son of Miriam and Kalev ben Yefuneh. Hur protested this notion of building a golden calf, and the Erev Rav, this convert, the Egyptian, killed him, and he was a prophet. And Aharon knew that if a prophet and a Kohen die in the same day, Mashiach is not coming. So he took it upon himself to, first and foremost, trying to gain some time, because Moshe, according to them, was late 6 hours, but he was not really late. They miscalculated. Moshe says 40 days and 40 nights. It has to be full. But they counted when he left, and he left in the middle of the day. They didn't count the half day. So Moshe Rabbeinu, according to the Zohar, Satan showed the people of Israel and this Erev Rav a casket floating in mid-air, and they said, this is the burial of Moshe. Moshe is dead. So they were freaking out. It says, Moshe took us out of Egypt. We don't know what to do. He's not coming. Make us a god. And of course we know Aharon's trying to stall for time. He says, let's get the gold from your wives. He says, Vayomer Alehem, Aharon, parku nizmei hazahav asher b'oznei neshechem, beinechem uvnotechem v'aviu lahem. Aharon was hoping that if they said, go get the gold from your wives and your children and your daughters, it will take a long time. Because I don't know if you ever tried to take gold from your wife or from your daughters. It's a whole day fight. So he was hoping that they will not give it up so easily. And by then Moshe Rabbeinu will come. But exactly did not happen. He said, "Vayitparku kol ha'am et nizveh." They said that the men by force took them, all the gold and everything that were wearing, and the nezamim means the earrings, so to speak, and all the gold they wore, and vayaviu el Aaron. They brought all this gold, and Aaron now is what we call in a very bad place. He didn't know what to do. So he did something, kind of in a haste. He took this gold and he threw it into a fire. He didn't even, had anything that, he started building or anything. He just, the Torah says, "Vayitzar oto becheret." It says, "Vayikach miyadam, vayitzar oto becheret." And later on we'll see that when Moshe confronted Aaron, says, "What is this? What have you done?" He said, "I didn't do anything. I just threw the gold into the fire, and here comes this, ox, a calf, starts speaking." And vayikach miyadam, as we said, vayitzar becheret, vayaseu egel masecha. The word masecha, as we know in Purim, we have masecha, we have customs, we have covering of ourselves. The word masecha is a very interesting word. It's actually two words. One is evil and one is good. Samech mem, mas, and cha is ko. Every time you see in the Torah ko, kaf hey, by the way, that's when Hashem started the world, was kaf hey Elul. He started creation. After 6 days, he was ready. Aleph Bet Tishrei, which is Rosh Hashanah. Aleph Bet Tishrei is the word Bereshit, is the same letters. Ko Amar Hashem, what ko, kaf hey. That's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in every important thing, says Ko Amar Hashem. Is a holy of holies, so to speak. And Samech Mem, as we says, is Mas Secha. So the combination of the two of them, sometimes people are like evil and sometimes they're good. He says this is what happened here. Aharon threw the gold into the fire, and here comes this calf that starts speaking. Question is, how was this, so to speak, gold statue starts speaking? So we know quickly that there was a boy named Micha that Moshe Rabbeinu saved. Micha was one of the children that they put into the cement of, the building of the pyramid when Hashem sent Moshe, and Moshe saw this baby because, Pharaoh says, if you have time for thinking of getting out from now on, I'm not going to give you even hay. You have to find your own hay and make these bricks and build it. And of course they had a quota, and if they never met the quota, they will take children, babies, and put it in. So Moshe saw this and he saved this baby Micha. Of course Hashem says to him, don't. And Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was looking for the casket of Yosef, as we know, he took a gold tass, a gold plaque, and he wrote, Ale Shor Ale, rise ox rise, and he wrote the name of Hashem. He threw it into the Nile after the daughter of Asher, Serach, showed him where it is. And of course Moshe threw it into the water, and Yosef bones rised from the water, even though they were in a very heavy metal casket. And this boy Micha saw this, and he stole this task, stole this gold plaque. And when the Erev Rav, when Yunius and Ibrius were making this with Aharon, he threw this task into this fire, into the gold melt. And of course this comes here, that here goes, this ox is rising, this golden calf rises and starts speaking. It says, I am the God that took you out of Egypt. He starts talking from where? From this task that was created. And he says that Aharon was trying again to gain some time, and he says, Vayomer Aharon, tomorrow I'm going to build a mizbeach, I'm going to build an altar. Vaikra Aharon vayomer Chag Hashem laAdonai machar, let's do a holiday for Hashem tomorrow, not for the golden calf. He was hoping that by then Moshe Rabbeinu will come. And as we say, Vayashkimu mimacharat Vayalu olot. By the way, the word machar is also the word rachem. Aharon said maybe Hashem will have mercy on us. Rachem is mercy. And as we know, is also the word rechem. You know, rechem is the womb. As we know, after Cain killed Heaven, when Cain murdered his own brother Hevel, it says after chatat fetach rovetz. You know, it says that the sin is at the opening. You know, if you take the word, what's the opening? What does it speak? Cain speaks of in the Torah. It says that this, you know, Satan is waiting at the opening where the baby just come out. You know, the word rechem, as we say, is womb. If you take the letters of the word rechem and you look after each letter, the letter that comes right after, it will spell something. If you take resh, what come after resh is samech, right? And I'm sorry, sin. And what come after chet is the letter tet. And what come after mem is the letter nun, satan. It says Satan is right at the opening as the baby comes out. And it says here that the people got up very early and they start sacrificing and having, you know, a big feast and laughing in front of these golden calf scenes. And as it's happening down below, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe, Vaydaber Adonai Moshe, Lech red kishichat amcha. Hashem says to him, Lech. Lech in Gematria is 50, Lamed is 30, Chaf is 20. It says, red, you are going to be removed now from your 58th gates of knowledge, because Moshe Rabbeinu reached the highest. There's 50 gates to knowledge, and Moshe reached all of them. And he became the smartest of men, even more than Shlomo HaMelech later on. The Shlomo was Chacham Mikol Adam, as we know. And Moshe now was at the 50th level to receive the Torah. And Hashem says, Lech red, you're going to come down to 49. Why? Because Shichet Amcha, because the people you took out of Egypt, Amcha, your nation, not my people. The people of Israel always refer to Ami, my nation, or Bnei Israel, the children of Yaakov. It says, Saru maher min haderech asher tzivitem. Look, they're already making chas v'chalila this sin. I just spoke to them. You know, I gave them the 2 commandments. You gave them the 8th commandment. And look what they do in Egel Masecha. They're making this golden calf. And they bow to him. And they make sacrifice to him. And they say, Ele Elohecha Israel asher elucha me'eretz Mitzrayim. They said, this is the God. Because, you know, again, remember, the Erev Rav had always worked tangible items. Right? The Pharaoh, the Nile, the goat, they always believed, you know, the pyramids, the Sphinx, all this tangible gods, so to speak. So they made themselves another one, tangible God, the golden calf scene. ויאמר אדוני אל משה, ראיתי את העם הזה והנה קשה עורף הוא. I see these people, again, Am, not the people of Israel. It says that they're very stiff-necked. And Moshe Rabbeinu was worried because now Hashem says to him, Hashem says, let me. By the way, Hashem should not really say, let me. If Hashem wants to do something, he says, I'm going to do it. What do you mean, let me? Hashem says, Anach li. Anichali, I'm sorry, let me get mad at them and let me destroy them, and I make you, we're going to start with you and make you a big nation. ויחל משה את פני אדוני אליו ויאמר למה אדוני יכרע אפיך? למה? Why Hashem? Why you want to get all mad? This is the people you took out of Egypt with all the miracles. What are the people going to say? You brought them here to kill them in the mountains, in the desert. This is not really the essence of please return from this anger. שוב מחרון אפיך וינחם על הרעה לעמך. It says, remember Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the promise that you promised them. And I will make them like the stars, and I will make them receive the land, and I will do everything that I promised. How can you, Hashem, now want to kill them, destroy them all? Moshe was very, very powerful, what we call warrior for the people of Israel. He was about to give up his own life, the Gemara says. Even here we see that later on he says, Mechenina misifrecha, erase me from my book, from your book, so to speak. As we said in last parasha, Parashat Teitzaveh is the only parasha that Moshe's name does not appear. Misifrecha, from your book, if you look in Hebrew, is Misefer Chaf. From the 20th parasha, Chaf in Gematria is 20, and Parashat Teitzaveh is 20th parasha. And that's why he says, Mechenina misifrecha asher katavta, asher Gematria Teitzaveh, 501. So he says here, ויפן וירד משה מן ההר ושני לוחות העדות בידו, לוחות כתובים משני עבריהם, as we mentioned, you can read from both sides exactly the same. והלוחות מעשה אלוהים הם. And this is the hands of God written them. And remember, this is the letters of God that was prescribed on them. And Yoshua, as we know, his servant Joshua was there waiting for him at the bottom of the Mount Sinai for 40 days. And he heard these voices, loud voices coming from the people of Israel. And he says to Moshe, I hear voices of war. But actually Moshe corrected him, says, no, those are not war, this is a joyful, chaz v'chalila, they are very, very happy, they're working another God. Vayhi kasher karav el hamachaneh, when he got closer to this, he took the luchot and he broke them. So we say, by the way, that day was the 17th of Tammuz, at the year 2449. That was the first time Moshe Rabbeinu broke the first set of luchot, and that day, for generation, Yud Zayin B'Tammuz, in the future will be broken. The stones of Yerushalayim, the walls of Jerusalem will be broken and compromised on 17th of Tammuz. It's exactly the same day. The Zohar said that the stones were so heavy that when they saw the people working the golden calf, the letters just flew out. It's like taking the neshama out of the body. When the body's neshama leaves, the body falls down to the ground. And that's what happened. Moshe Rabbeinu actually dropped those. But Moshe Rabbeinu, the Zohar says something amazing. He says that when he came down, he saw two things. He saw the people doing two most horrific sins, which covered the two first commandment. Anochi Hashem Elohecha, lo yeh lecha Elohim acherim, lo ta'aseh lecha masecha. The two commandments that Hashem spoke, the people of Israel broke with the Erev Rav. So Moshe Rabbeinu, in an essence, and you'll notice that Hashem never ever got mad at him that he broke the first set of luchot. What happened here? Moshe Rabbeinu basically says, if I gave them the 10 Commandments, I will obligate them with those sins. So I'd rather break them as if they never received it. This is like a contract, right? If you give somebody a contract to sign, until they sign it and accept the rules, it's really worth nothing, not even the papers were written on. So Moshe Rabbeinu did the same thing. He says, why will I obligate them right now? Hashem will kill them. Let me not do that. Let me take this sin upon me. Just like Aharon took the sin upon him, and not have anybody build this golden calf. So too Moshe broke the luchot and really saved the people of Israel from being obligated by the 10 Commandments instantly. And as we say, Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Aaron. He says, "Vayomer," says, what is this? You know, Moshe says, "Vayomer Moshe el Aaron, ma asa lecha ha'am hazeh, ki hevet aleim chatat gdola." Again, it's the Am, it's the people of Egypt, not the people of Israel. Vayomer Aaron, al yicharapa, don't be mad at me. They wanted to kill me. They already killed Hur, as we mentioned. They were about to kill me. And they said, make us a god that will walk in front of us, because Moshe is not coming. He's not. And he says, Aaron goes to the description of how he asked about the gold and everything. And all I did, he says, they give it to me. Vashlechehu ba'esh, vayetze ha'egel hazeh. He says, I just threw the gold into the fire, and this, so to speak, this calf came out. And we know that Moshe Rabbeinu saw that these people are like Pharaoh. Now he realized these are the people, they're really not good people. They came just to join the people of Israel to see where the money going and all the fortune of Egypt, and of course the two sons of Bilaam, Eunice and Imbrus, came out just to learn about magic. And now Moshe basically is about to punish all the people that took part in this Chaz v'Chalila horrific sin. And he says, Moshe Rabbeinu stand at the gates of the camp, so to speak. Vayomer, Mi L'Hashem Elai. Mi L'Hashem Elai is Milah. He says, whoever has Brit Milah, come to me. And who was that? Was the tribe of Levi. As we know, the tribe of Levi, it was the only tribe that were allowed to do Brit Milah in Egypt and in the desert. None of the other tribes were allowed to do Brit Milah in Egypt or in the desert. The first time they did Brit Milah is when they left Egypt, right, in order to eat the Korban Pesach and to leave Egypt. And also when they're about to come to the land of Israel with Joshua, they all did Brit Milah again. So for 42 years, nobody did Brit Milah except the Levites. By the way, Levi, it's the word Veli, meaning for Hashem. They are the tribe that belongs to Hashem. They're not part of the 12 tribe, if you notice. They are the 13 tribe. And they have Nachala only in the cities of shelter and Bet HaMikdash. Leviim in Gematria is 86 Elohim, Leviim. And it says here that they took their sword, and of course Moshe takes the golden calf and he makes it dust, and he gives the people to drink, and they kill all the people that participate. And as we know, 3,000 of them died, meaning that really not a lot of people were participating. And again, the notion that the people of Israel never stopped them, that's why they're obligated by the sin. Remember, when you see a sin against Hashem, that's the only time you're allowed to stand up and fight for, right, so to speak. If somebody humiliates you personally, just leave it to Hashem. Don't even answer. But when somebody insults you because of you giving Dvar Torah or trying to make fun of Hashem, you have to fight them and stand up for Hashem. And the people of Israel did not do that. So we'll continue. We have a few more minutes, and we see that the people of Israel made tshuva, veitablu velo shatu. This is exactly what happened also with Esther and Mordechai. Esther gathered all the people of Israel and all the Jewish people around the world, and says, especially in Shushan, Habira, in the capital of Iran at the time, Parasu Madai says, I want you to gather all the people of Israel, make tshuva, fast and cry. And that's exactly what happened. By the way, Mordechai HaYehudi gathered 22,000 children to pray for Hashem that day, those 3 days, because the children's prayers are always accepted because they have no sins. And as we see that Moshe Rabbeinu, after this horrific sin, he does something. He takes his tents and he removes it from the people of Israel, and he goes out to the desert in a distance of 2,000 amma, this is amma, meaning 1,000 meters. That's, by the way, where the Eruv come from. That was the Eruv. This is the Masechet Eruvin, is what's the distance between private and public domain in order to walk through things, or if you don't have an Eruv, you cannot carry anything, not even push a cart of a baby. You have to have an Eruv, and that's where it came from, the Eruv. By the way, in our parasha, the whole golden calf scene is always the longest part of any parasha, and only the Kohen and the Levite read those two aliyot, these two portions. Why? Because they are the one that can atone for the people of Israel. Because Hashem did not want the people of Israel to basically, Chaz v'Chalila, be embarrassed by the sin of the golden calf. So Hashem instructed Moshe that the aliyah of the Kohen and Levi, they will read the whole story of the golden calf sin. And of course we know that Moshe Rabbeinu is asking Hashem to show him who he is. And as we know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is basically showed him just the kesher tefillin, so to speak. And he says that he forgave him. The question, how did Hashem forgive Moshe Rabbeinu on this amazing sin? Because he says to him, Salachti kidvarecha. And of course we know that he even asked him, says, make another set and tomorrow on the 18th of Tammuz, I want you to come up for another 40 days. And I'll write again the 10 Commandments. So, when Avraham Avinu was tested by the last and 10th test, the Akedah of Yitzchak, which is, by the way, is the only time the Torah writes that was a test. The other 9 was not mentioning Asher Nisa. This is not a test. But of course, we know Avraham Avinu stood by all the 10 tests. The final one was the Akedah, to sacrifice his son Yitzchak. Of course, Yitzchak was not a child. He was 37 years old. And that's why it's called Akedat Yitzchak, because he agreed to be sacrificed to Hashem. As we know, Hashem says to him, Al tishlach yadcha el anar, don't, harm the boy. Now I see how much you love me and how much you're the one that, from you will continue, there will come the whole people of Israel. And then Hashem says, Al ta'as lo me'uma. He says, don't make a muma. The Zohar says that Avraham wanted to have a little scar to remind Yitzchak at what level they arrived, at what level of purity and holiness and sacrifice to Hashem they were. Hashem says, no, not even that. Don't scar him. And so Avraham says, I need to at least sacrifice. So as we see, the Torah says, Vayar Avraham v'ine ai lachar asvach. He sees a ram that's caught in the bush. But the Torah says, achar asvach. Achar, after the svach. So from here we see something beautiful. If you look at the letters of the word svach, samech, right, bet and chet. So if you look after samech, what letter comes? Ain. After bet, gimel, and after chaf, lamed, egel. Hashem says to Abraham, Abraham had the future prophecy of the golden calf, and he says to Hashem, I'm going to sacrifice this ram, this egel, to atone for the people of Israel in the future. So Moshe Rabbeinu says this to Hashem, you already forgave us for this sin, so please forgive us. And Hashem says, Salachti kidvarecha. And that's why Hashem says, Vayomer Adonai Moshe, Pesol lecha shenei luchot avanim karishonim. Now make another set, like the first set, and we'll do the whole process again. And tomorrow morning on the 18th of Sivan, I want you to come up again to Mount Sinai. And of course, Hashem gave him also the 13 attribute of mercy that we read all the time. And Be'ezat Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu now is promising the people of Israel that will receive the land of Israel again. But he says, he's warning us, which is amazing. Look, in the Torah, Hashem says, do not have any deal with Arabs. This is here in our parasha. It says here, Hishamer lecha. Hashem says, again, in Parashat Ki-Tisa, this is in chapter 34, in verse 12. Hashem clearly instruct the people of Israel not to do any deal or peace with Islam, with Arab, with the Palestinians, with none of those, so to speak, the people that really steal the land of Israel. They are the real mitnachalim, so to speak. It says here, Ishamer lecha pen tichrot brit leyoshev haaretz. Do not have any covenant with the people that you come upon that sits in your land right now. Pen yu lemokesh. There will be like a mine, when God forbid you step on a mine, you explode, right? He says there will be a mokesh bekirbecha. There will be chaz v'chalila, horrific things for you. They will always destroy you. Why? He says, okay, they are chaz v'chalila, they will bring you to make a lot of sins. And we see today, for an example, Kachol ve'Lavan is really, you take 3 military, head of military that want to do a deal with the Arabs and control Israel. This is exactly what Hashem says, do not do. This is important, never to do this. So we see here, Baruch Hashem, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even from that days, before even the people of Israel came to the land of Israel, says, be careful, do not have any covenant with the Arabs. Why? Because chaz v'chalida, you'll mix with them. Your daughters will go with their son with your daughters. And chaz v'chalila, this is avodah zarah. And we see today that's exactly what happened. And Hashem here also speaks of the holiday of Pesach. And he says, everything that we need to do, and Hashem give them exactly again the Shabbat and all the laws And it says basically keep the Pesach. And again, this is another karet. If somebody eat chametz in Pesach, Elohim Yishmor, is worse than murder. This person, just like a person that desecrates Shabbat, ותיקראת הנפש מעמיה. This is another mot yumat, chaz v'chalila. And of course Hashem says here, the last thing is speaking of the 3 regalim. Regalim is the 3 times we go up to the temple. We're obligated, all of us, to go. It's what we call on Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And Hashem says something amazing. He promises us when we gonna go up to visit him and make contribution on those 3 regalim. He says that none of the countries around you, all your enemies, ולא יחמוד איש את ארצך בעלותך לראות את פני אדוני אלוהיך 3 פעמים בשנה. Imagine that the entire people of Israel will go up to the temple in Jerusalem. They left everything behind. Nobody touched anything. Nobody stole a penny, a shekel. Nobody stole a lamb. Nobody touched anything. None of the millions and millions and millions of enemies around the people of Israel never came try to take over the land while the people of Israel were in Jerusalem. The Gemara will teach us that there were 21 million sacrifices every one of those 3 times the people of Israel came. Imagine, they say, people of Israel were standing from the Nile all the way to the Jordan River to come and sacrifice. And of course, the last thing Hashem says here, I want you to be careful not to mix meat and milk. לא תבשל חלב בגדי אמו. The halachot of kashrut. And Moshe Rabbeinu, of course, as we said, went up another set of 40 days. And of course, he will come down again after this 40 days. And it will go up, from the first month. It will come back down on the 29th of Av. And it will go up in the 1st of Elul for another 40 days. And it will come back on the 10th of Tishra, which is Yom Kippurim. And it will bring the whole Torah, both the oral and written Torah and the Luchot and everything that happened. Now when Moshe Rabbeinu came down the second time, something happened. He had such an aura, the light around him, that people could not look at him. He was glaring. And the people of Israel were very afraid, even Aaron and the elderly, everybody. And Moshe had to cover. This is, by the way, when we talk about the putting the tzitzit above us to cover this, we learn from Moshe. And of course, to put a kippah on, we learn from Moshe. At that moment, Moshe Rabbeinu covered his head and covered his face. And the people of Israel were in awe when they saw this masveh, so to speak, this light that he had to cover. V'ra'u bnei Israel et penei Moshe ki karan. Karan, by the way, we have the word corona. Today, corona is karuna. We have to call upon Hashem. Is the only way to come out of it. And we see here today that Moshe Rabbeinu had to cover himself when he came to speak to the people of Israel. When he went to Hashem, he took it off. And I want to thank all of you for watching with us and being with us here at the Kollel Ahavat Israel. This class will be posted on our website, neshatorah.org. And Be'ezat Hashem, tomorrow we have a special class for Purim at the JCC in La Jolla at 8 o'clock. There'll be a lot of cookies, candies, ham and tush, even sushi. And please come over, with costumes and celebrate the miracle of Purim. Again, an easy rest of the fast of Esther today. God bless you, and Shavua Tov and Chag Sameach.